Hi, I'm International Grandmaster Ron W Henley here with ICC, and this is the second part of our Rook Endings tactics and themes. In the first part, we covered quite a number of tactical themes that come up every day in Rook Endings. In the second part, we're going to continue in that direction. We're going to cover deflection, blocking or interference as it's known, the Lucina position, rank cut, where you cut the enemy king on the rank, domination, quite often involves trapping the enemy rook, also zugzwang, which is another form of domination. We'll cover triangulation, we'll cover boxing in, and of course the desperado rook, and last, walling in, and then fortress. Of course, the fortress technique is one of Karpov's favorites. Okay, so we got a lot to cover, so without any further words, let's just go ahead and get started. Deflection involves luring an enemy piece away from a key square, typically a square from which it defends another piece or threat. In Rook Endings, deflection most often is associated with deflecting the enemy king or rook that is charged with the responsibility of preventing a passed pawn from rolling right on in for promotion. So in that respect, one of my favorites here is an in-game study. And here, in this in-game study, we see that white has a passed pawn only on the 6th rank. And the white king, though, is on the edge of the board. Even more so, it's actually in the corner. White starts the proceedings with pawn to h7, obviously threatened to promote. Black has two ways. He can either go back to stop the pawn, or he can go behind the pawn to stop the pawn. Let's take a look at both events. In the event that black goes back to stop the pawn, he has the incidental threat to come over rook a8 and do a checkmate. White, however, meets this challenge with rook check, forcing the king to the d-file, and then we see a perfect example of deflection as he attacks both the rook and the king. And of course, after rook takes rook, pawn to the 8th promotes, and queen versus rook, as we discussed in video 1, is absolutely winning, although it does take a number of moves. Now let's go back. Remember we said that after h7, black could also play rook h2 and get behind the pawn. Classic Tarrasch principle, rooks belong behind passed pawns, whether yours or the enemy's. But now, white has what I like to call a mirror or a dual theme. He gives check on the rank, and then the fantastic rook f2 shows a very nice example once again of the deflection motif, and then the pawn goes into queen, once again reaching the winning queen versus rook ending. A very nice, very pristine, very clean example of a dual deflection theme. Now the next position comes from a famous game with several-time U.S. champion Frank James Marshall, who the Marshall Chess Club in New York City was named after. Marshall is playing white. His opponent, Akiba Rubinstein, arguably one of the greatest Rook endgame players of all time, is playing black, and as we can see, black has a number of positive features. He's got well-advanced king, he's got a pawn one square away from promotion, and he's also got his rook executing both protecting and cutting off the enemy king on the back row. Notice also the black king is attacking the white pawns, and the white rook is tied down to prevent the pawn promotion. Marshall, realizing that the situation is pretty dangerous because, for example, he can't even approach the rook, then we get simply back to skewer school that we covered in the first video, and of course an easy win. So, Marshall was one of the all-time great swindlers in chess, and so he tries pawn to g5. His idea is pretty simple. After pawn takes pawn, rook takes check, pawn, king over, he would probably just play rook back, and white probably is unable to make progress and the game should be a draw. However, Rubinstein was equal to the occasion. After pawn to g5, he had his own little trick. He played a deflection technique. He went ahead and sacrificed his beautiful advanced pawn. After rook takes, rook down check, king up, traded rooks, and the resulting king and pawn endgame is pretty trivial. We can see black will simply take the pawn on f3, and the white king is far, far, far away. So a very, very nice, simple example of Akiba Rubinstein using the deflection technique.